Thank you, Madam Chair. So when BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, it killed 11 workers, and it set off an oil gusher that spewed millions of barrels of crude into the Gulf of Mexico. It covered an area ultimately that was the size of Florida. Nearly 1 million seabirds died. Sea turtles washed up dead, choked to death by oil in their throats. Workers and small businesses lost literally billions of dollars. The BP oil spill was a massive catastrophe by any measure, and we're here today to make absolutely sure this catastrophe does not occur again. So finally, after 5.5 years after the explosion, the administration has proposed a drilling safety rule to address some of what went wrong with Deepwater Horizon. Mr. Melito, you're here representing the oil industry, and in your written testimony, which I looked at last night, you argue that offshore drilling, I want to quote this correctly, is, quote, safer today than it ever has been, and that new safety rules for industry are too prescriptive and would just prevent you from conducting more drilling. Now, this isn't the first time you've made that kind of claim. Exactly 10 days before the Deepwater Horizon disaster, you criticized opponents of offshore drilling and said that people shouldn't be concerned about offshore drilling because offshore drilling is, quote, very low risk, close quote, and new technologies, quote, close and shut off any type of opportunity for any kinds of liquids or fluids to get into the environment. So here's my question. Do you still think that the opponents of offshore oil drilling were wrong to be concerned about the risks involved in offshore drilling 10 days before your industry caused an historic disaster?
I think we should always be concerned about the potential for any kind of incident.
So you think they were right to be concerned?
Yes, we should always be concerned about these types of incidents from occurring. And the original quote in there was actually from the commissioners of the Presidential Deepwater Oil Spill Commission, who said that it's safer now than it was 5 years ago. So that was coming from Chairman.
So when you said very low risk and close and shut off any type of opportunity for any kinds of liquids or fluids to get into the environment, when you said that 10 days before this massive explosion, you were wrong, I take it.
Well, that's my belief still is today, that it's a low-risk activity and that we can continue to do this with a performance-based system.
So you feel the same as you did 10 days before that explosion?
I feel that we have a regulatory framework that has changed dramatically.
I'm not asking about the changes. I'm asking about, you said 10 days before the explosion that new technologies, quote, close and shut off any type of opportunity for any kinds of liquids or fluids to get into the environment.
That's the intent of the technologies.
The intent, but I take it that was not the fact.
That's not how.
No, that's not in fact. You know, in fact, your whole industry has dismissed safety concerns. Just weeks before the BP oil spill, Jack Gerard, the head of the American Petroleum Institute, who I think is your boss, said, and I'll quote again, the oil and natural gas industry has a proven track record, words that I think you used here this morning, of safe oil and natural gas development. And again, this was just weeks before the Deepwater explosion. The oil industry comes in here repeatedly and explains that it's doing a great job on safety. And it says, like before, they don't need more oversight. But considering this is exactly what the oil industry was saying right up until the minute the BP rig exploded, I think the American people are right to be a little skeptical of oil industry claims. So, Ms. Savitz, you are a marine biologist who's been a leader on ocean conservation issues for decades now. Now that the government is bowing to industry pressure and proposing to expand oil drilling into the Atlantic Ocean for the first time in decades, are you confident that current industry practices will protect us from another BP disaster?
Thanks, Senator Warren. Of course not. Of course we're not confident of that. And I think that the takeaway point from the conversation you're having is the industry simply, it seems like, did not anticipate the scenario that played out during the Deepwater Horizon. They didn't anticipate the shift in the way the drill bore landed in the annulus, and their equipment was not capable of dealing with it. Will that same thing happen again in the next one? Maybe, and maybe they will be prepared this time because maybe they learned something, or maybe something completely different will happen. And there's no way to know that, and there's no way to know that we'll be able to stop it if it does happen. And if there is such a spill, we're talking about major losses to coastal economies. We've seen a lot of communities now rising up against that. 91 coastal communities have passed formal resolutions against offshore drilling.
We can't afford the environmental or the economic costs of another BP spill. So it seems to me that before new oil rigs are set up in the Atlantic, we need to take a very hard look at what additional drilling would actually mean. The discussion is too important to simply take the oil and gas companies at their word when they tell us, like they did 5.5 years ago, that they've got it all under control. Thank you, Madam Chair.